Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. Pause the video right now so that you can grab a notepad and a pen because I want you to make a commitment to yourself. Make it to me. Make a commitment to me that you will jot down an action item, some kind of note that you will implement in your business today. That's what it's all about. We have to drive the business forward. We have to do meaningful things each and every day to make improvements and innovation. He's stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. Have you heard this expression? You're stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. I heard that many years ago when I was quite young, and there's nothing mysterious about it. It's pretty obvious what is being meant or referenced. When somebody says this, what they're alluding to is that an observation that someone or some sort of act is actually not taking advantage of certain opportunities due to the fact that they're overly focused on a smaller opportunity. So that's the dimes are the smaller opportunities, the dollars, the big opportunity that's being missed. And I suppose if you want to put a bright side on it, you want to look at the silver lining, is that the person at least is picking up dimes. You know, the worst thing that you could do is step over dollars and pick up nothing. So at least somebody who is being criticized as stepping over dollars to pick up dimes is still engaged in trying to move the business forward, is trying to do something productive for the business. But of course, you want to take advantage of your greater opportunities, the dollars, and let's leave the dimes for later when there are no more dollars lying around. Let's then look at picking up dimes, so to speak. When you notice this in somebody, it's really a symptom. It's essentially a symptom of poor perspective, maybe improper paradigms or underdeveloped decision-making skills, maybe a lack of planning and organization. This kind of symptom would manifest in failing to consider the big picture and long-term thinking. This is really an indication that a person is maybe overly concerned with short-term thinking. And I had a manager that worked for me one time, and this was just really a quality individual. This guy was a hard worker, he was trustworthy, reliable, and you know, so many of the things you would look for in an individual, but I had to be critical of him in this regard, that he would often step over dollars to pick up dimes. And when, you know, he was so strong in these other areas, why would you want to focus on this? It's really about, you want to change a culture. You're trying to teach this to your people. So I want you to forward this video to your people so that they can recognize this symptom. And culturally, you want to communicate and create this value in your organization that people recognize when this is happening, when somebody is stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. And this particular individual that I'm referring to, I was really trying to modify his behavior and get him to think long-term. It's because he was such an excellent individual, because he was so talented, that I needed to criticize this part of his personality. Something in his past had got him to really focus on expenses, and I think that's a great thing. Again, he was picking up dimes. That's a good thing, but not insofar as it prevented him from picking up dollars. And what was happening was he would spend so much time focused on trying to mitigate an expense. He would do something himself or look after something. I've seen this in multiple managers, of course. And in doing so, they would fail to realize great opportunities that the other strengths that they had were, that would present to them. And so I would really point it out to him and say, okay, well, that's great that you saved us $400 as an example. I'm thinking of a particular instance here. You saved us $400, but you may have cost $4,000 in opportunity, an order of magnitude of opportunity cost that was spent instead. So really it's worthwhile taking the time to point this out when you notice this in certain people. And you, as a leader of your organization, you want to take the time to communicate to your organization that this is something that you don't want to allow to permeate the organization. You want to be mindful of this. And using the term criticism and being critical of this sounds strong or harsh, but you have to always look for these opportunities, to look for these little things in which you can improve. And when you have somebody who is primarily focused, let's say, on expenses to the degree that they may be omitting opportunities for driving revenues, then that can be really costly in your organization, and not saying anything is a problem. Now, these things tend to be hidden often. They're one of those things that aren't often exposed, and that's why you want to distribute the video and have a lot of people keeping an eye on this so someone can kind of call it out. It's, if we use the analogy of a healthcare symptom, sometimes you don't notice and someone says, hey, your voice sounds a little scratchy, or you look really tired today, or you're a little bit pale today, are you okay? And having everyone being mindful and observant and be able to point out a symptom in your business is a great strength for your organization, where someone can say, hey, I noticed you're doing this. You're spending a lot of time on this particular task here. Is there something that we could maybe delegate to somebody else or whatever, so that you could focus on those things that you do best? Is this a situation where you're stepping over dollars to pick up dimes? And if you get that, where that conversation is natural to be had, and that people know that you really want to, sort of reward identifying this symptom and eliminating it at its root cause, then your business will thrive. There seems to be a preponderance of risk aversion in those individuals that continually make this mistake. And so perhaps somebody in their career previous to being employed with you, or even with you, they may have been criticized for taking on an expense that turned out to be a poor return on investment. And so that type of criticism with a certain type of personality, combined with a certain personality who really has thin skin or really a low resilience to criticism and takes things very personally, can result in them having this preponderance of risk aversion. And so you want to be careful and make sure that your team understands that there are calculated risks that we need to take in business in order to succeed, and that there's an expectation that people not be too risk averse, too careful, that they are missing out on opportunities. And again, you look to the parable of the talents in Matthew, 25? I'll put it on the screen. But in the parable of the talents, the one person that had the one talent and buried it and then returned the one talent, that person was risk averse. That person didn't want to make any mistakes because the master might be critical of the mistake. Well, you don't want that. You want your people to invest. You want your people to make calculated investments and risks in order to take advantage of the best opportunities. And that takes communication. It takes you as a leader looking at those times that you've communicated to your people, and whether you've given them some sort of criticism, you want to make sure that they know what's expected. You can't give you can't have a double standard. You can't treat one person one way for the exact situation that you're treating somebody completely different. You want to make sure that you reward those behaviors that you're looking for, and hold people accountable through the administration of consequences when people are not giving you the behaviors you're looking for. And as it relates to stepping over dollars and picking up dimes, have that conversation and let people know, hey, I noticed this, and I can appreciate that you're a little bit risk averse because there was that one situation last year where I was a little hard on you because you maybe wasted some money over here, but I don't want you to swing the pendulum too far the other way, where all you're doing now is making sure that you're cutting expenses to the detriment of our ability to earn revenue. Let's consider some examples of where this happens practically in a business. So it is when people are investing, high value resources in low return tasks or strategies. And maybe a failure to delegate would be another example of that. So if you have a manager who's doing something himself because he knows he can do it right, he can do it well, but the return on that particular thing will be really low, and he could have delegated that to someone else on the team, somebody who, you know, you're not remunerating nearly as high as your top people, and the failure to delegate was an example of stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. He was saving the expense, so to speak, of not delegating this to somebody else, but he was wasting the dollars by wasting his own time. A failure to invest a little bit of money in the completion of a project, maybe outsourcing, you know, reaching out to a company like ours to look after something that you just don't do well. And I've seen situations, another example that I've observed is where managers will invest lots of their own time in order to learn a skill that is not a very scarce skill. It takes maybe a long time to learn the skill, but it's something that they could have easily outsourced or delegated to somebody else. And I'm using those terms synonymously. You may not have somebody in-house that you can delegate to, but you could have reached out to a firm like ours and outsourced it and had it done for you really quickly. Instead, you tried to learn it all on your own, and to what detriment? What dollars were you stepping over in order to save those dimes, to pick up those dimes? So you saved a little bit of expense by not outsourcing, by not incurring the expense of outsourcing something, but all the dollars that you invested in learning the skill. Now, if it was a high value skill, something that you could leverage for many years to come, that's great. So, you know, I don't want to sound like I'm talking out both sides of my mouth here. What I'm saying is, don't invest a lot of time in a non-scarce, low value skill. And people do this all the time. Another example is when managers are focused on the wrong priorities. And that really comes down again to understanding things, keeping things in a long-term perspective, and evaluating your opportunities correctly. So if you're focused on the wrong priorities, we talk about the urgent and the important. A manager who fails to understand what's important because he isn't taking the time to sharpen the saw and to look at things and to plan and organize correctly will often engage in those dime picking up activities where the dollar picking up activities are neglected. Another one I see is getting hung up on being right. You know, I have one of our videos is, do you want to be right or do you want to be successful? Is the customer always right? I think that's the title of the video, but we'll put a link for you. And the idea here, in any environment, in any situation, in any context that you want to frame this, where you get so hung up on the principle of the matter. I get it. It's important to, you know, support the good principles. But if you're doing so at the peril of what's most important to your business, where it's like, no, I'm going to get to the bottom of this no matter what. We are not going to have wasted that $50 or that $150. And it costs you hours and hours. Now, this is one of those things. You have to use your judgment as a manager. If you found out something that was only a $50 matter of principle and you were able to prevent that from recurring for many years to come, you may have saved tons of money. But that's, again, maybe something you should delegate to somebody else to investigate. Is it the best use of your time? And getting hung up on something and being right is often stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. I think of a particular manager who was in a dispute with a customer over something, and the manager was probably correct. The customer thought that he damaged something or stole something. I forget what the situation was, but it was highly unlikely that any member of the team damaged the thing or stole it. It was more likely misplaced. Again, I forget the details, but I remember when it was brought to my attention, I thought, why did we waste any time? Instead, we should have just said to the customer, I'm very sorry, I'm not exactly sure. We can do an internal investigation, but we won't take up your time with that. In the meantime, let me compensate you. I think this was like about a $10 compensation item. And it was like hours and very high level managers in the organization taking up their time trying to get to the bottom of this. This is stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. And I think the manager may have thought, well, it's the principle of the matter. We're being accused of damaging something or taking something or misplacing something, and we didn't do that, and we can't afford for a customer to think that's like, no. Apologize to the customer. You can certainly leave it up for interpretation and say, you know, I don't know that that's exactly what happened, but Mr. Customer, we want to look after you. So you don't have to say in principle that you're guilty of anything, especially if you know you're not, but you need to look after the customer. So there's an example of getting hung up on the principle of a matter, stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. You can also apply this concept to errors of omission. Think about those things that you skip doing in your organization. You don't take the time to make sure that they happen religiously and very consistently, and you end up costing yourself something. And like celebrating success of your organization. Maybe you're like, well, I'm just really busy right now, so I haven't got the time to plan out award ceremonies and weekly recognition, and I don't have the time to go down to the shop floor and pat someone on the back or whatever. That again is often an example of stepping over dollars to pick up dimes, because what is it that you're working on immediately? If it's something that you're working on right now that's very important and it's the proverbial dollars, then fine. But often these errors of omission are where somebody, I'm checking my email and getting back to these voice messages I have from third-party vendors who are trying to sell me something, or I'm engaged in a meeting with somebody that I don't need to be engaged in right now, and I failed to plan to make sure that I very consistently and regularly go and pat people on the back and recognize them. Another one is accountability. If you're failing to hold people accountable, it's like, well, I had never set up my strategy with the HR team to make sure that we had regular and consistent performance reviews of this person, where we can do, again, once again, either commending them for doing a job well done and giving them some guidance on where we can go in the future to develop them, and maybe reprimanding them or giving some coaching on those unacceptable behaviors. These are errors of omission, and once again, managers are guilty of stepping over dollars to pick up dimes, where they think, oh, that's not that important. And you're not conscious of this. You're not consciously making these decisions. It's one of those things that you're procrastinating, or you're just undervaluing something that's very important. And when you frame it with a cliche expression like stepping over dollars to pick up dimes, you go, yeah, maybe by skipping today's meeting where I'm going to do a performance review, that's a great example of stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. What were you doing? Are you having a long lunch instead, or are you engaging in a political conversation? Whatever the example is, errors of omission are a big one as well. Since this concept is often born of an attitude where it's really important to control expenses, I get that. And I would commend somebody for being very expense conscious, and somebody who understands that businesses that fail to keep a close eye on their expenses can get out of control and can go out of business. That's a really important thing, but it can lead, when there's this imbalance, when somebody's too focused on expenses, that they're ignoring the opportunities for driving growth. That's where we have a problem. So what I recommend in your business is consider, like everybody can consider both opportunities and expenses, yes, but have somebody who is primarily focused on expenses and is sort of the gatekeeper of the, the person who holds the purse strings nice and tight. And there's another personality that maybe lends itself better to driving exciting growth opportunities, and those people can offset one another. They can buffer each other out. Instead of expecting one person to do both, then either have two different offsetting personalities of people, like somebody in accounting maybe who's going to do your expense control and really give some pushback and put the brakes on a little bit, be a governor in terms of how much we spend, whereas somebody who's more in the sales and driving revenues is looking at the next opportunity, the next investment, and that kind of stuff, and they can offset one another and they can collaborate really well together. If you don't have two personalities like that, you can have mechanisms, or you're going to have to put something in place that before you spend a particular amount of money, before you invest in the opportunity, you have that checklist. And we've created videos on plotting the practicality of your business ideas and your best opportunities and that kind of thing. Make sure that you set up some sort of mechanism, and like the other video on decision making, that you're sort of check, check, check. I've looked at all this. But the best practice that I really recommend is take another stakeholder, somebody whose personality is a little different than yours. That's where you can get some synergy out of the opposing personalities, and you don't have to be in conflict. There's almost always in an organization somebody who's a little more risk averse and somebody who's like, come on, let's go, let's move forward. Those can be great synergistic forces if they collaborate and there's trust involved. That's what I would recommend that how you handle this. That one personality who's really good at exploring opportunities, he might say to the other, hey, we can't be too busy saving money to make money. And that person is the one that looks at, say, your equipment and goes, you know, if we upgraded this equipment here, our production capacity could go up by X percentage, and we could drive revenues here. And then that expense person could look at it and do a full analysis, make sure that he hasn't missed anything. So, okay, well, let's take a look exactly how much it costs. I'll get the quotes for increasing our tools or our technology, our equipment or whatever. And you set the projections for how much we'd need to make and everything. Then they discuss it and collaborate to determine whether or not it's realistic. You have to properly evaluate and analyze opportunities so that you don't end up investing resources in the wrong things at the wrong time. And that's what we see very frequently when people are stepping over dollars to pick up dimes, is that they've pursued an opportunity that is a proverbial dime, and or they're failing to pursue an opportunity that's a proverbial dollar, and they're investing the resources. You have limited resources. You have finite resources within your organization. You always want them leveraged to the greatest extent so that they can drive opportunities in your business while you're still having that balance and making sure that you're plotting these and making good decisions, organizing and planning so that you don't invest in the wrong things at the wrong time. Once again, as Stephen Covey likes to say, you got to put first things first, and there's a way to go about developing that as a habit in your organization to make you more effective as a manager and make each of your people more effective. The last one that I think of is failing to put a proper value on your time. So I have recommended in the past that you should sort of assign, maybe you're not paid by the hour. You're probably not. Maybe you, if you own the business, maybe your primary mechanism of being compensated for your time is profit. And when you're not profitable, you're actually paying to work. I've been there. I've paid to work many times, and that's not a comfortable feeling. But you need to put a value on your time. You need to quantify your time and your people's time, all of your people's time, in such a way that it is very obvious to you. By quantifying it, by operationalizing things, that making it so that they can be measured, it can be much more obvious to you, and you can make more deliberate decisions about how to invest those resources. And there is a mistake I see people making time and again, is failing to put a specific quantifiable value on his own time and others' time. So look at that in your organization. What is an hour of your time worth? So that when you are spending some time doing something, you can decide, is this an example where I'm stepping over dollars to pick up dimes? Because let's say you're $1,000 an hour individual. Your talents and skills could be capable of generating $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 an hour in revenue for your business over time because of your ability to plan and scale your business. But you're working on something that, like in my previous example, is going to save the organization $400 one time, $400 expense you're going to save, and you spend hours and hours trying to get to the bottom of this. That is an example of stepping over dollars to pick up dimes, and it's the wrong thing to do. So I think that's where I want to leave it for today. Leave some comments that we can all learn from. Perpetual refinement.